International Museums Day to you all. It's wonderful to be here despite it being such a hot day. And I'm going to speak about museums uniting a divided world using Hyderabad as a case study. These are the three main museums of Hyderabad. There are several more private museums also, state galleries, museums that specify like cars and things like that. But the main ones that we think of when you think of Hyderabad, the first is where we are today, and we are privileged to be here. It's the State Museum. It's a public museum run by the state government. Then you have the Salarjung Museum, which is run by the centre, the government of India. And the third museum I'm talking about is one that I have been associated with for the past 20 years, the Chowmehla Palace Museum, which is a private museum, and it's run by a private trust, a not-for-profit private trust. Now, when we talk about museums uniting or playing a role in uniting a divided world, when you think of the most popular tourist attractions in this museum, what are they? What are the first two things that come to mind? The first is the Buddhist gallery. For any of you who've gone there and seen the wonderful collection that is present here, including drawings of the Ajanta cave paintings, which were commissioned by the 7th Nizam of Hyderabad. There is also a mummy here of Princess Naishu, which dates from between 300 to 100 BCE. So it's about roughly 2,300 years old. Where did these come from? What is the provenance of them? So the Buddhist gallery is largely Deccan, so the erstwhile Andhra state, as well as things from Aurangabad. So it's largely in the Deccan region. And the provenance for the mummy is, of course, Egypt. So they've come from places very far away from Hyderabad. And this, for those of you who do not know, Buddha Purnima is actually celebrated in this museum. And on that day, the gallery becomes a semi-religious center where Buddhist monks from all over, even I think as far as Japan, come here and use the gallery as a place for prayer and meditation. So isn't this helping unite a divided world? Isn't the museum already doing the job beyond actually displaying artifacts which were important? When we look at the visitor numbers for this exhibition, or for this museum, it's it's peaked at about just under 25,000 visitors annually, and the bit in orange that you see on top is the foreign visitors. So we do get far fewer foreign visitors than we do Indian visitors to the museum. And the dip that you see during COVID is quite obvious, and then it's going up, and there's been an exponential rise in the last year. Similarly, for the Salarjung Museum, what binds people there? What brings them there? It is actually a Victorian clock. It was a clock that was made in England, brought to India, which attracts thousands, if not lakhs, of visitors every year to the museum. And there is also the famous veiled Rebecca, which is a statue made in Italy in 1863. So people in India, in Hyderabad, are going, that is people waiting for the clock to strike the hour, waiting hour after hour with huge LCD screens, waiting for it to become, for this drama unfurling from a Victorian clock which came from England for the collection of the Prime Minister of Hyderabad, Sir Salarjung. So this was Salarjung III. So it came during, for the Prime Minister, for one person, but this is still attracting so many people. Isn't the museum doing a job beyond just being a place, or beyond just being a repository for objects? And that is the figures for Salarjung. They are the most staggering of all. Salarjung Museum gets up to 13 lakh visitors a year, and those are the foreign nationals up on top in a small sliver of blue. And again in 2021, there's a bit of a thing here, 2020 and 21 have been mixed up. So it really went down in 2020 because of COVID, and then again it started peaking. It's not yet reached the pre-COVID time, but it's still over 10 lakhs or just under 10 lakhs a year. And the Chowmehla Palace. What are the most popular tourist attractions here? And when I say most popular, it's what most people come for, not the specialist galleries, but the things that appeals to everybody. The Khilwat Mubarak, which was the seat of the Nizams of Hyderabad, where the darbars were held, and also the vintage car collection, which is from everywhere from England, Europe, and America. This is where the Miss World pageant was. So all these young girls who participated in the Miss World competition came to Chaumela. Something drew them there, and they visited the palace and the museum. And therefore, again, this is about uniting a divided world through the museum. And the figures for Chaumela. Again, you see a dip. It's about halfway to what is at the AALOCHANA Museum. So we have had, last year was about roughly 6.5 lakh visitors annually in 2025. And it does get significantly a larger proportion of foreign visitors as well. I'm quickly going to run through, because of the paucity of time, various aspects of the Chaumela Palace. One was, how did the palace become a museum? What do you do when the building itself is an artifact? What about the collections within the artifact? So you have something which is an object of display, and within the object of display, you're displaying something else. What happens behind the scenes when we set up exhibitions? What are the challenges we face, and what is the road ahead? So first, palace to the museum. This palace complex was the seat of the Asif Jahi Nizams, and the last Nizam of Hyderabad, Nawab Mir Barakat Ali Khan Mukarram Jah Bahadur, decided to convert the palace into a museum. The family wanted to give something back to the city, and this was an ideal gift that they could give. A not-for-profit trust was set up, so all the money that comes from the ticket sales or any events goes back into the palace, into the running of the palace, making new exhibitions and restoring the buildings. And also, this was something where they opened up something where previously it was a restricted place. Only a few people could go into the museum or into the palace as it was then, and not everybody was allowed. So by doing this, they opened it up to the citizens of Hyderabad. And what's the most important thing it does? It roots the city in space and time. In space, because it's that location of Chaumela has become famous for being, the whole locality is called Khilwat. And in time, because that is the history of the whole Asif Jahi dynasty for 225 years until 1948. And this is the palace then and now. On the left, you see a manuscript called the Tuzuki Asafia, which is a late 18th century manuscript. And what I've highlighted in yellow, it shows pretty much the entire quadrant of the city south of the Charminar. That's the Charminar there, which was taken up by the palace. It was roughly 60 acres. And on the right, you have the Google Earth image from last week, I suppose. And that's the Charminar. So you can see how much it has receded. So you've got about 12 acres left. It's 1/5 of the total area that was originally part of the Chaumela. And the word Chaumela itself means 4 mahals. Today we have 1 quadrangle left of the Chaumela, but there was a series of various quadrangles of various of 4 mahals. Then coming to the building itself, or the palace complex itself, which you can look at as an artifact. So here, what can you discern from it today? What does it mean? So there are 3 things that the whole palace complex informs people about. One is the past, the present, and the future. The past, what do you learn from the complex itself? That it has global influences, and the global influences on the architecture are quite visible, and that it came to define the syncretic architecture of the Deccan. And you can also see the architectural development of Hyderabad city, because every Nizam contributed to the architecture of the place. The present, it provides a platform for social, cultural, and educational events, and it enables the continuation of traditional skills and techniques of construction. And the future, there is also something for the future, in fact probably the most important. There are lessons in sustainability, climate sensitive, and contextual design. You look at the past, and I'm only talking about the parts that are left of the palace, and if that's the map, the floor plan of the palace, and I've color coded them. There are things which, unfortunately, we don't have anything earlier than this surviving. The first bits that survive, the oldest areas that survive, are from about 1800 to 1850. Then there is another palace complex, which is the actual Chaumela, which survives today. The only Chaumahal that survives is from about 1860 to 1870. It was designed and constructed in the time of the 5th Nizam. And then between 1890 and 1910, under Mehboob Ali Pasha, the 6th Nizam, and finally the Khilwat or the Darbar Hall that everybody visits today, was actually constructed by the 7th Nizam, and only, well, 2 Nizams have been coronated there so far. This is the Chaman Bangla, which is the scholars' retreat, and this is the oldest part of the palace. It has more vernacular Deccan style, residential. This is the only residential part of the palace that survives today. This is the Chowmahalla, and you can see the British influence. This was designed after the British residency in Hyderabad, which is the Women's College Koti. And here, in the pictures that you see on the inside, is the darbar being shifted from a Mughal style darbar, where people would normally originally sit on the floor on gaddas. They're now sitting on chairs. So this influence of the British affected the lifestyle as well, and not just the architecture. But the whole concept of having 4 palaces built around the courtyard remained the same. That was Deccani, or that was local to this region, and the architecture was British or European inspired. And then between 1890 and 1910 was this the Shishalat and the Bara Imam, the first 2 buildings, the administrative buildings you reach when you come into the palace. And this was when there was a beginning of the Deccan revival style. So while the materials they used, so there's a lot of steel that was imported from England. There's also the jack arch roof construction, which is a colonial derivative. But the overall vocabulary looks more Deccani than European. And the crowning glory of all of this, or rather the next stage of this, was between 1912 and 15, when the 7th Nizam, who really saw himself as the inheritor of the Deccan, constructed the Khilwat Mubarak in the Deccani style. So this brings back a lot of the influences that existed pre-British era, but again the scale could be achieved only because he used large steel girders and a lot of to cover the roof construction with Victorian-inspired false ceilings, which came from England. So a lot of British material that came into this, but the overall construction was to look Indian. And the present. It provides a platform. It's a great background for fashion shows, for a lot of ghazal programs, for the Katia Concourse, which was a big car show that happened in 2017. And it provides a great backdrop even for a lot of weddings and events. And it is a lung space for the city. So on the photograph at the bottom, about 5 years ago, I was there one afternoon and spoke to these girls who were in their burqa playing a football match. And I said, "Why are you here playing a football match? It's a palace." And they said, "It gives us the safety and comfort and an open space right in the heart of the old city, which otherwise we do not have anymore." So it has gone beyond the brief of being a museum, of being a place which shows the culture of the Asif Jahi Nizams. And it's also gone to school children who come there in groups, college children who come there to learn about the city. And also a place for picnics. The lady on the right that you see, she's sitting out there in the gardens having a picnic under the trees. I'm sure that's not what the Nizam thought this palace would be used as when they decided to convert it into a museum. We also do a lot of restoration work, and the palace provides continued patronage for craftsmen and artisans who practice their traditional skills. So whether it is doing the stucco on the side of the clock tower, where you can see the clock here, and the repair of all the intricate details which actually are not visible to any visitor, but they're just being done because they were originally there, and because the craftsmen, when you give them something to do, they want to do it diligently and perfectly. And this was the roof, the jack arch roof that was done over the main entrance gate. Last year we finished this. And the stucco on the ceiling of Khilwat at the back. This was done in 2023, and done by people just standing there and carving out of the ceiling rather than making the decoration. So they first put up this whole roof, and then from the ceiling they carved out the details. These were made specifically at the floor level and then pasted on. So it was a labor of love. A lot of work went into it, but the palace provides the platform for these traditional craftsmen who know these traditional skills to continue them. Otherwise, they would be lost forever. And that is the ceiling after they'd finished working on it. there's also a scope for working with color and using techniques for which otherwise, some of us had only heard of, but the palace gives an opportunity for people to keep them alive. So these are the main columns when you enter, the marble-looking columns of the Khilwat Mubarak. They look like marble, but they're not. They're made out of lime with streaks of charcoal in it. And then to give the final finish, we rub them down with coconut, dry coconut. So that gives them the sheen. So the old and the new were made to match. And again, what I'm trying to show you in all of this is that the people who make up these places, it is the people, whether it is the karigar or the craftsman or the painter, they're all coming together to work on the fabric of the palace. And the carpenters and the woodwork. You also have these details. This is from the clock tower balcony, and all of this you can see the bits where it was repaired, there's a difference in color. So instead of making something new, the old that could be kept and retained structurally was retained. And these are the details that from the old one, the new bits being carved to match. And also for the finials on top of the chhatris that you see when you walk in, that's the palace carpenter, and he's matched it. This was just one before he reached the final version. So those are also being matched. So whether it's the stucco, the construction, the carpenters, and the future. There are lessons from the architectural fabric for the future, where you see the design was contextual in the sense that the palace was made for a warm, dry climate. So even if it got really hot in the summers, the fountains and the verandas next to before the rooms here, these verandas act like wind catchers, taking in the cool air and cooling the entire space. So there is a huge difference in temperature, in the ambient temperature, when you're outside the palace and inside the palace complex. So for architects, for people interested in climate design, this is a great place to study what the Deccan has to offer. Then what are the collections within the artifact? So this is a marvelous artifact by itself. How do you then put in things into that? What are the exhibitions we have today? I'll briefly talk about this and then how we actually went about doing them. So from the bandstand, which is right at the back, we have the vintage cars and buggies. We also have a lifestyle gallery, there's textiles, there's the people and places gallery, which is where the photographs and maps are displayed. There's the arms gallery, there's a new HEH exhibition, crockery and crafts, and the Quran exhibition. And there are other facilities for the visitors too. And the areas marked in green are those within the palace complex which are accessible by visitors. Now the collections. The photograph galleries which we have are narratives of people and place. The photographs are from the private collection of the palace, but they are historic too, because they are the ones that Raja Deen Dayal had been commissioned to do. In fact, because they were made for the Nizam, the photographer Raja Deen Dayal had to actually not even keep the negatives with him and give everything to the palace, because this was for the palace, especially for the photographs of the Zanana. We also have rare maps on display, manuscripts, seals and coins, and currency of the Hyderabad state. The arms gallery, it is historic again in its own right, because it has objects which were given by the Mughal emperors like the Mahi Maratib, and it also shows the evolution of weaponry in the Deccan, starting with the Qutub Shahi, Mughal and the Asif Jahi weapons. So if any scholar wishes to go, and we've had scholars now who want to study weaponry, they can see all of this on display. There are over 1800 objects on display in the two arms galleries. The textile gallery has been an inspiration to several designers and instilled an awareness of the Khada Dupatta, which is the Hyderabadi outfit, the four-piece outfit, and metal embroideries of Hyderabad. The Quran gallery is an extremely unique collection of rare Qurans from across the world. And the vintage cars and buggies. There are also some custom-made cars here, including the yellow Rolls Royce, and examples of early automobiles like the Napier's, which was made in Italy in 1906. These are the photographs of the galleries for those of you who haven't been. That is the first version of the People and Places gallery, which was curated and designed in 2009. And it links the sounds to the places of Hyderabad. That is the gallery redone in 2015. That's the textile gallery. You can see again people from all across the world coming to see what the Khada Dupatta was all about. Some more pictures of the textile gallery, including these saddles which would be covered in heavy brocade for young children to ride. The textile gallery again. and the arms gallery. And what you see in the front is what was gifted, not gifted, I would say, it's an honor that was given by the Mughal emperor to all the other Indian kings who accepted the Mughal emperor as the sovereign, the Mai Maratha. And it was a sign of great honor to have it, and Hyderabad, of course, was given that honor. These are some of the weapons, and the rifles, and the 2 miniature cannons. The Quran gallery, and the vintage cars. There's also the crockery gallery on the first floor of Khilwat, and this is the most recent gallery on the life of Mukarram Jawad. And it's got photographs and objects of his. What happens behind the scenes? You've all seen this, but how does this all work? How does it come together? There's a lot of research involved when you set up a gallery at the palace. We also have to first identify the appropriate location within the complex where the exhibition is planned. Then comes the selection of objects, cleaning and conservation if required, providing the right climate for display or as close to the right climate as we can achieve, lux level calculations for the gallery, so to know what the light levels have to be. And we also then work with local craftsmen and framers and specialists if required to create the final gallery. So it's not really simple. We have to identify the right people, identify the right place, and the best method of displaying the objects. What are the technical considerations? We try to have a passive buffer zone to minimize dust and maintain a stable airflow. So for example, not to enter the gallery directly, but through a veranda with screens, ideally to cover the dust and to keep the sun out. The lux levels, we have to maintain about 50 lux for sensitive materials like fabrics, which is why the textile gallery appears very dark to some people, but that's because we're trying to protect the textiles. 150 to 200 lux for moderately sensitive materials, so like digital reprints, which is what we've used in the new gallery on the HH Nizam, because most of them are digital reprints. And 300 lux for insensitive materials, and by insensitive things like metal, which do not get affected by light. So the arms gallery has the most light, and that was the room chosen for the arms gallery so that it would not affect the light, because it would be impossible to curtail the light to a lower lux level than required. We also try to see what are the relative humidity levels by putting dehumidifiers in the monsoon if required and making sure that there's a stable airflow. And we also have to think about what is the long-term maintenance of the objects, given that now we have about over 6,000 people walking in and out of the museums every day. The research. This was a map that was restored, and nobody knew what it was. And it turned out it took all these people and more to sort of decipher, and everybody came up with something which then like a jigsaw was put together, and it was found to be the campsites of the second Nizam from Hyderabad to Bombay. And the map read from the bottom right of the page, so you kind of started here, you went up like that, and you came down like that. So it was almost impossible for anybody who would read a map in the normal way to figure what the map was. But it was very cleverly done, and then once you knew what it was, it brought in wonderful details. Even now when I go to the palace, I find something new every day. So when you go there, you'll find on the bottom left is Hyderabad city, and it has mango trees, and then on the bottom right, you'll see Bombay, which has got palm trees. So everything changes within the topography as well, but extremely cleverly done. And it covers that entire distance, and what's more, it's still the Hyderabad-Bombay highway today. The cleaning of the textiles and cleaning of the objects. So this was the seat that had to be cleaned up, and we put it up for the HEH gallery late last year. The Quran exhibitions, once we selected 36 Qurans that would be on display, the fabric had to be darned, and we used a Japanese process to repair and to restore the paper that was damaged. And the arms, there were karigars who we brought from Jaipur, because they were 5th generation karigars who knew how to repair or to clean arms in the traditional Indian manner. So they did not use any chemicals. They used ash that was made from cow dung and cleaned it with water. So there was nothing that would damage the weapons in any way. Everything was done in a very systematic manner, but trying to use the traditional manner again to keep these traditional crafts or methods alive. And when finally you decide on the objects, you've got to fit them into an existing place. So a lot of drawings happen, whether it is hand sketches, AutoCAD, 3D simulations to see what the gallery would look like. And then within this, then we can play around with color of the walls, the size of the frames, or anything that can be changeable, because neither the objects nor the space is changeable. Those are fixed. So within those fixed parameters, there's a lot of planning that goes into work. And then trying to actually make the samples on the wall. So when you start putting things on the wall, like we did on the top right here, the color was, it was a glossy color, but that didn't work, so we had to change it to a matte. And then for the textile, for the arms gallery, choosing the right color that would go up, but because the walls went all the way up, it was decided finally to put the same color as the ceiling on the wall. So all of this, there's a lot of thought that goes into making this gallery. It's not just about let's put something in this room. It doesn't work like that. And then trying to get the lighting to work in the arms gallery when you have such a ornate ceiling, that is also an issue, especially when objects go all the way to the top. Then mock-ups are made in the space. So by actually what you do on the computer, and then when you come to the walls, you realize that it's not the same, because there are bumps in the wall, there's some shadows that come in the way, something or the other. The walls are sometimes not strong enough to take heavy objects. So for the arms gallery, we had to actually put all the arms on this board, and they had to be tied down with acrylic. So it was a non-corrosive metal tying the weapons down. And after they were fixed, they were then anchored into the walls using a lot of timber gutties, or strips of timber into the wall so that the wall would hold. And then we also had to restore them with had to pack them up with lime plaster for those boards to hold, because one of those weapons falling on somebody's head is going to be lethal. So we have to even take care of that while doing this. And this was a handcrafted crest of the 8th Nizam, taken from his stationery letterhead. It was then put into AutoCAD, made into blown up from maybe not even a centimeter and a half to 3 feet, about a meter. And so about 100 times it was increased in scale, and then hand molded in brass and hand casted. That's the version which was in the MDF version. Then working out the lighting with the lux meters, we try and see how that would work within the space. Is there enough light? Can people see? What is the overall impact of the room? Are the objects being lit? If they're being lit, sometimes the objects get lit too much, and then behind the glass, then you can't see them. So then we have to work out different ways of getting the lighting to work. The display as well, how things would be displayed. So on top, these are acrylic rihals for the Qurans. We made them see-through so that you could also see the cover of the Quran on the underside on a mirror. And these were the multiple frames that were made using leftover wood. So everything is recycled as much as possible. So we had recycled timber, which we made into the frames for the palace. And then using the furniture that exists in the palace, for the Quran gallery, we used a lot of these trunks that were lying in the stores, and we took them out, had them polished, had them cleaned, and then put up the frame on top of them, and then put the Qurans in them. So we try to reuse also what we have, because even the objects that we have, the stands for display also are unique, and we try our best not to get anything new made, although it's much easier to get the museum display cabinets readily available. And this is the sort of back-end work that happens. To put up the arms display, we had to put up a scaffold which was on three levels, and have people stand on all 3 levels with these deadly swords and skull breakers, and have people put them up carefully so that it's solid enough that it will not harm anyone in the future, but carefully done so that while doing it, no damage to the weapons themselves is made. And this is a wonderful story of a man who came to repair the buggies of the palace. So all the buggies that you see are in working condition. They were not before they were restored. And this gentleman is Khan Saab, and he and his friend Vittal came to the palace one day and said that their grandfathers had worked on this palace before to repair the buggies, and they requested permission to do so now again. And they did them here. They even used at the Falaknuma, and then they also went on to do at Jodhpur and Mysore. So they knew the skill, but their children were software engineers and doctors. So that skill in a way was lost with them because they refused to share it with other people. And that is a problem that we face continually with working with craftsmen, that they do not share with anybody other than their own. Chomela is the People's Palace. It opened in 2005 to an average of 20,000 visitors annually. In 2025, we've had 6,25,000 visitors, over 6,25,000 visitors last year. It has provided direct employment to over 100 people on the rolls as curatorial, security and maintenance staff. It has brought a lot more visitors to the area. It has boosted the microeconomy and opened up a new cultural, educational and leisure venue for Hyderabad in the heart of the old city. It has also made an impact on the markets and the shops outside. So you'll see a lot of heritage shops come up. You'll see a lot of dastars or the Nizam's headgear on cafes and chai shops. With say Taj Cafe or Nizam's Cafe. And there are lots of antique stores also just right outside the palace. So this is the impact of the people when they come, the visitors, and they go out and they want to buy something like that. And so it's obviously affected or impacted what happens not just within the palace walls but outside it. What are the challenges we face? And I will quickly run through this. I'm not really going to spend too much time on this. The challenges are when you work within a historic space that is adapted for a new use. Sometimes working in a gallery, you wish, I just wish the roof was not so high, or I just wish this hall was a bit longer or a bit shorter. If you were to design something like this from scratch, it would be much easier. We also work with the challenges of working in an old building. So the humidity levels to control them can be tough, especially in the monsoons, because lime is hygroscopic and it attracts it absorbs a lot of moisture. There is a lot of pollution in the air around. There is a lot of hydrogen sulfide in the air because of the Musi being so close to the palace. So the hydrogen sulfide affects and tarnishes the metal embroidery. So we cannot put out more textiles just because every time you put a textile out, it is going to get polluted no matter, unless you put it in a vacuum seal, and then it's not going to be something that the visitors would appreciate seeing, and they want more of it. So the textiles get damaged, so we have to be very careful about that, and also the Qurans. Anything which has got silver is tarnishing very fast because of the hydrogen sulfide levels in the air. There's a lot of pollution and dust, especially in the summer when a lot of visitors come. If you've got 5,000-6,000 people walking in the palace every day, that is going to bring in a lot of dust when they walk in. And also some of the stairs on the khilwat, the timber stairs, are damaging the walls, because when people are walking, these were meant for about 50 people to walk twice up and down twice a year, but now you have 5,000 a day. So that is telling on the building, and so we are now trying to reroute the visitors and see what we can do. And there is of course the external pressures of development, the continued encroachments which carry on no matter what. What is the road ahead? We are working on new publications. We've just come out with one in January this year. There's another one planned. There are new galleries as well for the lifestyle, because that's been what the public, there's been an interest in that. Interactive displays, and trying to see whether we can bring in AI in some way, and specially curated events about the palace and about the Nizams. And I want to show you before I end this. I was there at the palace yesterday and I took this photograph from the visitor book. And you see somebody right up on top is written Hola from Spain. So this has also got multiple languages. There are people from different parts of the world, from Turkey, from Spain. I think this one also had Poland in it. Kerala. There are things in different Indian languages. So the palace is bringing people from across the world, and I think silently doing its bit in uniting a divided world which is becoming more and more divisive. And I would like to end with this thought for you, that museums transcend boundaries while creating inclusivity and unity in our divisive world. They serve as global sanctuaries where the friction of a divided world softens into shared wonder, proving that our cultural threads weave a single human tapestry. And that's the main Darbar Hall. Thank you.